Hello. If you're watching this, that means I just got banned. As in, I got a temporary 24-hour suspension. And we're back together on this deep, up-close, and personal YouTube video. Welcome back to the Hasanabi channel on YouTube. Now, some of you are probably wondering, considering that there's a lot of back and forth going on online about why I got banned once again. Well, you might have actually heard the truth. I got banned specifically because I covered the motives of the Israeli embassy staff shooter.
If you've ever wondered why people have such disdain in our culture for nepotism babies, Cenk's nephew is the perfect reminder of that, and he consistently streams on Twitch and posts clips on YouTube so that you will never forget this, because what you just watched in the open of this particular video is Cenk's nephew complaining, crying about the fact that he was suspended from Twitch for one day because he was endorsing and providing cover for the terrorists that killed two individuals at the Jewish Museum that happened to work for the Israeli embassy. And he's upset that Twitch dareth come down upon him with a 24-hour suspension, when in reality Twitch was doing their own platform and him a favor by giving him some consequences in lieu of an outright ban, which, by the way, they would do for anybody who wasn't Cenk's nephew in this particular circumstance, because obviously they have some kind of deal with him where they end up protecting him above all other Twitchers. So this guy is upset that he was held accountable as a joke, as like a little bit of, oh, get the heat off our backs, when in reality he is completely unharmed, despite the fact that, of course, he was putting out content in support of a terrorist, which is unsurprising because he's been doing this for the last 2 years, basically each and every day on his stream without any consequences. And that's what we're going to get into today. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
I got banned specifically because I covered the motives of the Israeli embassy staff shooter, which apparently, according to Twitch terms of service, dictates a suspension, even if I critically examine the manifesto, which is precisely what I did.
So Cenk's nephew tries to make the case that the real reason he was suspended is because Twitch has a dumb terms of service that essentially penalize him for critically examining the manifesto of the shooter of those two Israeli embassy employees in the District of Columbia, when in reality his analysis was quite critical and very much critical of this person, because if he says the word critical over and over again, that somehow changes the context of what his stream actually was, which, make no mistake about it, was meant to increase support for this terrorist. And yes, I am 100% asserting that. And the thing is, I don't even have to provide you a unique clip in order to prove that, because Cenk's nephew's very clip that supposedly proves his critical analysis does that very thing.
The reason why I read this is specifically so that you understand that, like, there is a shit ton of people that are like, no, this is the shooter's actions were directly about finding some Jewish victim to kill. Okay, it's deliberate. It's clear what his reasoning is. You don't have to agree with what he did, and I'm not urging you to. Okay, I'm not saying that at all, but it is deliberate. Ask yourself why the media is not saying that the shooter did this because they were distraught with the violence that they had seen unfolded in Gaza.
Now, the fact that Cenk's nephew put that clip in right there and he thought it proved his point that he was being critical of the manifesto is just proof positive of the fact that this is one of the dumbest people on the internet, because clearly and obviously the only people he was being critical of right there was the media, because he didn't like the idea that this individual was being smeared as anti-Semitic. This is a defense and a clarification, and by the way, support for this guy's motivations for this particular shooting, which, by the way, I don't want to go too into the gruesome details of the shooting, but it is reported that the male who was killed by the shooter was killed relatively instantly. However, the female tried crawling away after she was wounded, and essentially this guy did a mag dump into her. Then, of course, according to the witness, and I'll play the clip of this for you right here, he went into the museum where these people offered him water and tried to comfort him, you know, these evil Zionist monsters, and then he pulled out his stupid Palestine scarf and started chanting "Free Palestine," which is a clip that I'm sure all of you have seen.
No. Free Palestine!
Now, Cenk's nephew's critical analysis of this particular manifesto is to read it in full to his audience, to the cheers of his audience, by the way, while simultaneously condemning the media for painting this guy as anti-Semitic because he doesn't want you to believe that this guy's anti-Semitic. Now, of course, what we find out through the additional social media posts of this particular shooter is that he was very much anti-white. He had a bunch of posts where he talked about how he wanted to genocide white people, how they were irredeemable and whatnot. I'll put some of them up on screen for you right here. And the funny thing is this further ties his motivation, because this is a man of Hispanic origin, to what Cenk's nephew is preaching, because part of the reason he wants you to hate the Israelis is because he wants to paint them as white European settlers, not people that are actually from the Middle East, let alone from Judea, from Israel. Yes, according to Cenk's nephew, it is insane to say that the Jews are indigenous to Judea. But yeah, so this guy is not being critical of the manifesto. He's being critical of the coverage of the manifesto that paints this guy as anti-Semitic, because Cenk's nephew thinks it's really important for people out there in his audience to really understand the completely justified motivations that this guy had in his critical examination of this manifesto. Again, absurd. The double down is ridiculous, and this guy was only suspended, by the way, 1 day for promoting this.
Now, the reason why I had critically examined the manifesto of the Israeli embassy staff shooter was because there was a lot of misinformation taking place, as is the case usually online whenever there's a breaking news story. This is what I do. A big part of what I do is holding people's hands through the news media process by allowing them to think critically and helping them understand media literacy. This is precisely why I was covering the manifesto that my friend Ken Klippenstein was able to find and release.
So look, the idea that Cenk's nephew is somebody who is going to dispel misinformation or disinformation is crazy in every possible way. There are so many instances of him making stuff up, lying repeatedly, lying about his lies. It's absolutely insane. And one of my favorite things that really pissed Cenk's nephew off is that when he was ranked as the left-wing equivalent of InfoWars due to the fact that his broadcast is often just full of crap, he absolutely lost his mind. But make no mistake about it, when you look at this chart, it looks like he's actually ranked lower than InfoWars in terms of his bias. So for him to say, oh, I help people, and by the way, he's talking in this very monotone voice because he's trying to sound serious. This is how much of a goof he is. He thinks that if he talks more monotone and punches the camera in on him, then that somehow makes his content and his broadcast more intelligent, which again is the marker of somebody who is pathetically lacking in intelligence. But yeah, you're not a journalist, Cenk's nephew. You were obviously supporting this. The clip that you showed was you condemning people, painting this guy as anti-Semitic because you thought it was really important for his true motivations for the shooting, for this brutal shooting, to get out there. And I just want to point out that there are some people who have been banned from virtually all platforms who are making jokes about baking cookies in relation to the Holocaust that have to be looking at Cenk's nephew and how Twitch protects him and absolutely be flummoxed by this, because this guy is able to say way more crazy nonsense repeatedly and again only suffer fake consequences like this 24-hour suspension that he's still complaining about, even though it's deliberately designed to be fake consequences.
The story is that I got banned for it. I got temporarily suspended because this is a part of the Twitch terms of service. You are not allowed, as it dictates right here in front of me, to even show a violent extremist manifesto on stream while denouncing it. This, I think, is not good for news and press freedom. And I said on Twitter, I'll take the suspension, but I hope Twitch changes its policy in the future. And I do believe they might. Having said that, how do we get here? Especially considering that I had covered manifestos of the Cybertruck explosion. First off, I am not under duress or hostile influence or control. My first car was a 2008 Black Mustang V6 for verification. The Luigi Mangione manifesto. I do apologize for any strife or traumas, but it had to be done. Frankly, these parasites simply had it coming.
Now, Cenk's nephew says that he wants Twitch to change its policies, and then he talks about how he's done it before, and I just want to point out a couple of obvious obvious things, which is the two examples that he gave, which was the Cybertruck guy and Luigi Mangione. He completely read them differently. He gave the guy with the Cybertruck a hick accent in order to make him sound dumb, but the Luigi Mangione he took very seriously because that is also somebody who committed a murder that Cenk's nephew unambiguously supports.
The ADL, Apartheid Defamation League's very own Jonathan Greenblatt, went on CNN only hours after the shooting had taken place to make incredibly slanderous statements about me, stating that I was responsible for this. My rhetoric was responsible for this. Let's take a look.
All of us need to call it out. I'm thinking about the New York Times doing a gauzy profile a few weeks ago of this gamer, Hassan Piker, who regularly employs awful genocidal rhetoric against Jewish people in the Jewish state.
This is slander through and through. I do not apply awful genocidal language towards Jewish people.
So look, this is a guy from the ADL on CNN condemning Cenk's nephew, and to be clear, I'm not going to pretend that the ADL isn't an organization that cries wolf very often on anti-Semitism. However, this is not in any way, shape, or form slander against Cenk's nephew. He quite literally supports every single terrorist organization with the stated goal of genociding the Israelis, and he's made it 100% clear post this, talking about Hamas in positive ways and whatnot, talking about Hezbollah, and honestly, the clips are too ridiculous and overwhelming. I recommend you watch H3H3's Content Nuke, but the guy constantly refers to Jewish people as inbred and all sorts of other crazy things that are clearly and obviously meant to dehumanize those people. Now, to be clear, if you're trying to make the connection or the direct connection that this guy was a listener of Cenk's nephew, therefore he carried that out, that link has not been proven yet. So honestly, I have to be more fair than Cenk's nephew or the ADL guy would be to either party related to this. But make no mistake about it, this guy is clearly and obviously endorsing stated genocidal organizations because according to him, the Jews are just white Europeans that need to be overwhelmed. Again, I didn't play this clip in H3's compilation, but one of his most famous clips is referring to babies as settlers.
Palestinians have the legal ground to violently seize back their own homes from the settlers. This is a reality, and that is precisely the reason why they have to exist under endless occupation in the West Bank.
You know what? And that's why I say if it was settlers, that would be a lot more understandable. Yeah. But let's not obfuscate, okay? I understand what you're saying. But this dude just called babies militants.
No, I understand. And there are baby settlers as well. But there are baby settlers as well. There are babies in the settlements.
Now, that's an obvious one, but there's also the recent clip where he talks about how anybody who supports a Jewish state existing should not be allowed to be a dog catcher.
I think, like, this will never happen, but in a totally just world, any kind of, regardless of your background, any kind of Zionist tendency should be treated in the same way as being a rabid neo-Nazi, and you shouldn't even let someone be the local dog catcher as Felix was posting if they've ever exhibited any sort of like positive feelings about the state of Israel. I'm so serious about this.
They should be like disregarded from society, which is obviously meant to be dehumanizing language. And unsurprisingly, by the way, a huge portion of Jews are in favor of the Jewish state. So it's not hard to figure out where he's going with this.
But that wasn't enough. There were the likes of E.L. Jacoby, a Hosborough guy on Twitter who lies at the behest of the state of Israel quite frequently, saying, breaking, Hassan Piker, hailed by the New York Times as the future of progressivism, tells his audience that the DC attack might have been a false flag, then immediately says the guy was genuine with his actions. This is glorification of terrorism. Now, these two statements here are at odds with one another. But what's actually even crazier is that this is a 37-second video that is attached to this statement.
Now, the next thing that Cenk's nephew takes aim at is this guy who posted a clip of his stream where Cenk's nephew is basically playing into the idea that this was a false flag event, that this is just too good and too obvious and too perfect for the Israeli side, but then he backs off of it being a false flag event, and he's very angry at this, and he highlights these two statements, and he's like, oh my god, these two statements are contradictory to one another, but the thing is, the clip very much proves what this guy posted was absolutely wrong. Now, of course, the clip proves the exact opposite. It proves that Cenk's nephew said exactly what was described in that tweet, in that caption. Caption be accurate in this particular case.
Is that this is a 37-second video that is attached to this statement. Let's take a look at that 37-second video.
But like I'm not Mr. False Flag at all, but like every single thing that he did in the aftermath of the shooting is so fucking crazy that it's like you could not have fucking designed a incident like this. You could not have designed a better false flag incident like this. I'm not saying it is a false flag incident at all. I'm not saying that. I think this is just a one dude who is genuine in his actions and maybe, you know, a little bit brain broken.
So you guys heard the clip right there. This is what Cenk's nephew played for his audience in this particular video. And remember, he's calling out the caption for saying that Cenk's nephew basically told everybody that this was like the perfect false flag. You could not have designed a better false flag in this particular case. And then he immediately switched it up and said, well, I don't think it is, which again is an obvious technique to throw that out there to get people who are on board with that theory to give you cheers, but then to back away personally, not commit to the position because Cenk's nephew is an absolute coward. It is clear as day. Again, I'm not even bringing in additional context outside of Cenk's nephew's response video, but this is the clip that he played that he thinks supports him, even though he did exactly what they accused him of. Cenk's nephew did do in this case. It is clear and obvious. He's like, oh wow, this is like the perfect false flag. This is definitely false flag. I mean, false flag, but I won't say that. Like, even though it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck and acts like a duck, Cenk's nephew will not say that that's a duck. I just believe that, you know, it's just really obvious and looks like it, but I'm not going to commit to that. That's exactly what he did right there. Clearly and obviously. The guy embraced the manifesto, defended the guy from charges of anti-Semitism, and then he goes on to pander to the false flag crazies in his audience, and now he's condemning this guy for posting an accurate caption to a video where he does just that.
Okay.
Most people that retweeted this didn't even actually watch the video to see whether or not it actually matched up with what this person was saying. Now, why am I talking about this random account? It only got 6,000 likes. I retweeted. I said a fascinating phenomenon nowadays is watching people clip things in context that I'm saying and then turn around and simply claim that I'm saying the opposite of what I'm saying in the clip. This is a 37 seconds long video, and this dumbass lied about everything.
Cenk's nephew, you showed the video. It matches up perfectly with what he's saying. You showed the clip. The clip does not support you. The caption is accurate. Everybody who didn't watch the video, who just retweeted it, are smarter than you who did watch the video and think it defends you.
Why am I bringing this up? Great question. It's because the clip formulated by this account, which stated, Hassan Piker, star of Amazon's Twitch, says the attack sure looks like a perfect false flag. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. The guy was genuine with his actions. How fucking absolutely gross is it that this is currently being streamed right now to 40,000 people?
So this Dan guy who also shared the clip, I think gave an even more accurate depiction of what was said right here, where he's like, oh, it looks like the perfect false flag, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But then he says it totally wasn't. Again, all of this is accurate. Where is the issue? How are you, Cenk's nephew, the victim in this particular case?
Then it turned into this. Hassan Piker, hailed by the New York Times, the future of progressivism, tells his audience that the DC attack might have been a false flag. And yet, here is Jake Tapper retweeting this. So I guess Jake Tapper, one of the most important members of the media, who just came out with a book talking about how the media narratives did not match up with what the people were seeing in terms of Joe Biden's senility, is still doing ridiculous things like this.
Again, none of these captions are inaccurate. What he's obviously trying to convey is the people who believe it to be a false flag, who need to believe it to be a false flag. He still wants them in his audience. He wants to show them that he's on their side, but he's not going to commit to that position. But also, the manifesto is a good thing, and he really liked it, which again, his chat loved it, which is why he read it in the first place. Yeah, so this is Cenk's nephew just playing the victim, even though again, he got fake consequences. is. A fake punishment is setting him off to this degree because all these different people are realizing what he's doing, and he knows it's not going to last much longer for him. Now, of course, on this channel, we don't call for people to be deplatformed or anything of the sort, but I want to make something 100% clear to everybody out there in the audience. Cenk's nephew would celebrate not only your deplatforming, but your murder if he disagreed with you. So if he were to get deplatformed, I'm not going to shed a tear. I'm not going to speak up on his behalf or anything of the sort. Cenk's nephew helped create the culture of deplatforming on the internet.com, and that would be the perfect just desserts by his own worldview for him to be sentenced to. So again, live up to your principles, buddy. Enjoy yourself and stop your bitching about being held accountable to the most minor, fake, phony degree. But you know what? Those are just my thoughts. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. If you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about Cenk's nephew playing the victim. Till next time.